The humid August air in downtown Miami made my dress uniform stick uncomfortably to my back as I stood outside the Miami-Dade Police Headquarters, adjusting my tie for what would be my final official photograph as Detective Frank Rodriguez after 35 years of service. The retirement ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock, and I could see my son Marcus arriving with his wife Jennifer, who was already making that familiar disapproving face she wore whenever she had to attend family events that didn't revolve around her social circle in Coral Gables. Marcus had been distant for the past year since marrying Jennifer, a real estate attorney from a wealthy family who owned multiple properties across South Florida and had never hidden her disdain for what she called blue-collar lifestyle choices. During my decades as a police detective, I had sacrificed countless family dinners, weekend plans, and holidays to serve the community, working cases that ranged from petty theft in Little Havana to major drug trafficking operations that spanned from Miami Beach to Homestead, building a reputation that had earned respect throughout the force. If this story is touching your heart, please comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Give this video a like and subscribe to our channel because we truly help families going through difficult situations like this one. Your support helps us continue sharing these stories of overcoming adversity. What Marcus and Jennifer didn't know was that 3 months earlier, I had received a certified letter that changed everything. My late partner, Detective Raymond Ray Thompson, who had died in the line of duty 15 years ago during a drug bust gone wrong, had apparently left me as the sole beneficiary of his investment portfolio, something he had never mentioned during our 8 years working together on the narcotics division. The portfolio, managed by a discreet financial firm in downtown Miami, was now worth approximately $4.8 million. Ray had been killed during an undercover operation in Overtown when drug dealers discovered his true identity and opened fire, leaving behind a wife and 2 young children who I had helped support emotionally and occasionally financially during the years following his death. What I hadn't known was that Ray had been making smart investments throughout his career, putting money into tech stocks, real estate investment trusts, and municipal bonds that had grown substantially over the past 15 years under professional management. The irony was bitter and sweet simultaneously. After decades of living modestly on a detective's salary, helping Ray's family when they needed it, and watching Marcus grow up with limited financial resources compared to his friends from wealthier families in Kendall, I finally had significant wealth, but my only child was treating me like an embarrassment to his new lifestyle with Jennifer's affluent social circle. The retirement ceremony took place in the main conference room of the police station, decorated with department banners and filled with colleagues who had become like family over the decades. Jennifer sat in the back row, checking her phone constantly and making it obvious that she considered this event beneath her usual standards for social gatherings. Her family was accustomed to country club events, charity galas in downtown Miami, and exclusive parties in waterfront mansions that overlooked Biscayne Bay. Jennifer had insisted that the post-ceremony celebration be held at an upscale restaurant in Brickell, rather than the traditional police family barbecue that had been planned at my modest house in Westchester. Her argument was that my colleagues and their families wouldn't fit in with the image she wanted to maintain for Marcus's professional networking, since he worked as an accountant for a prestigious firm that handled wealthy clients from across South Florida. During the ceremony, Chief Martinez gave a heartfelt speech about my contributions to the department, mentioning specific cases where my detective work had led to significant arrests and convictions that made Miami safer for everyone. He talked about my dedication during Hurricane Andrew recovery efforts, my work with youth programs in underserved communities, and my mentorship of younger officers who had looked up to me as a role model throughout my career. Marcus seemed genuinely proud during the speech, applauding enthusiastically and even wiping away tears when Chief Martinez mentioned how I had missed his high school graduation because I was working a kidnapping case that couldn't wait. But Jennifer's expression remained cold and impatient, as if she was calculating how quickly she could leave this event and return to her preferred social environment among Miami's elite professional circles. The transition to the upscale restaurant in Brickell was awkward and uncomfortable for my police colleagues and their families, many of whom felt out of place in the expensive venue that Jennifer had selected specifically to make a statement about Marcus's new social status. The restaurant specialized in fusion cuisine and craft cocktails, with prices that represented a significant portion of a patrol officer's daily salary, creating an atmosphere of financial tension that overshadowed what should have been a celebration. Jennifer made several comments throughout the dinner about the adjustments that Marcus would need to make now that he was part of a more sophisticated social circle through their marriage. She mentioned that her father's law firm had clients who could provide real opportunities for Marcus's accounting career, but only if he could present himself appropriately in professional settings that required a certain level of refinement and social awareness. The most painful moment came when Jennifer was asked by one of my former partners about family traditions and how she planned to incorporate them into their marriage. She responded by saying that she expected Marcus to evolve beyond some of the cultural and social limitations of his upbringing, specifically mentioning that she hoped their future children would be raised with broader perspectives than what she called narrow working-class values. Marcus, who had been drinking more wine than usual, nodded in agreement with his wife's comments about needing to upgrade various aspects of his life to match her family's expectations. He mentioned that Jennifer's parents had offered to help them purchase a house in Coral Gables, but only if he could demonstrate that he was committed to elevating his lifestyle and distancing himself from what they considered the limitations of his previous social environment. Sitting at a table with colleagues who had risked their lives alongside me for decades, listening to my son agree with his wife's assessment that our family values needed to be improved to meet her standards, I made a decision that I had been considering for weeks. I quietly excused myself, went to the restaurant's bathroom, and sent a text message to the financial advisor handling Ray's portfolio. Please proceed with the transfer. I want everything moved to the account we discussed by tomorrow morning. The inheritance from Ray's investments would officially become accessible to me the following day, but more importantly, I had decided to keep this information private until I could observe whether Marcus's attitude toward our family was genuinely changing, or if it was just temporary pressure from his new wife's social expectations. I wanted to see if my son would choose money and status over the values we had shared during his upbringing in a working-class Miami neighborhood. The restaurant's atmosphere was typical of upscale Brickell establishments, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Miami River and modern art pieces that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. The contrast between this setting and the simple Cuban cafeterias where my colleagues and I usually gathered for celebrations was stark and uncomfortable, highlighting the economic and social divisions that Jennifer seemed determined to emphasize. After dinner, as we prepared to leave, Jennifer made a comment that cut deeper than any physical wound I had sustained during my law enforcement career. She told Marcus, loud enough for several people to hear, that she hoped their future family gatherings could be more refined, and that she expected him to limit his interactions with people who might hold him back professionally or create awkward social situations when they entertained her family's business associates. The drive home to my modest house in Westchester was solitary and reflective. I passed through neighborhoods where I had worked cases, arrested criminals, and helped victims during some of the most challenging moments of their lives. These streets held decades of memories, both professional and personal, representing a career dedicated to public service and community protection that had defined my adult life but apparently held no value in Jennifer's vision of success. Marcus called me the next morning, but his conversation was formal and distant, lacking the warmth that had characterized our relationship before his marriage. He informed me that he and Jennifer had made decisions about restructuring their family relationships to align with their new goals and social aspirations. He explained that they would be limiting family visits to major holidays only, and that he hoped I would understand their need to focus on building their future without what Jennifer called distracting obligations to the past. The following weeks brought confirmation that Ray's investment portfolio had been successfully transferred to my control, along with detailed documentation about the impressive growth these investments had experienced over the past 15 years. $4.8 million represented more money than I had ever imagined having, especially considering that I had lived paycheck to paycheck for most of my law enforcement career while helping support Ray's family and ensuring Marcus had opportunities for education and personal development. During the same period, Marcus and Jennifer were house hunting in Coral Gables with financial assistance from her parents, who had made it clear that their support came with expectations about the type of lifestyle and social connections that Marcus would need to maintain. They were looking at properties in the $500,000 to $700,000 range, relying heavily on Jennifer's family wealth to make the down payment and qualify for the mortgage. I began making strategic investments with Ray's portfolio, working with the same financial advisors who had managed his money so successfully. We diversified the holdings across real estate investment trusts focused on South Florida properties, blue chip stocks, municipal bonds, and some conservative growth funds that would provide steady income while preserving the principal amount for future security and potential charitable giving. One of my first personal purchases was a modest but comfortable condo in a quiet area of Kendall, not far from where Marcus had grown up, but in a newer development that offered better security and amenities. I chose a building that was well-maintained but not ostentatious, preferring financial security and comfort over display of wealth that might attract unwanted attention or create unrealistic expectations among family and friends. I also began making some investments in my personal well-being that I had deferred during decades of modest living. I joined a fitness center that offered programs specifically designed for retirees, updated my wardrobe with quality but conservative clothing, and scheduled comprehensive medical and dental checkups that I had been postponing due to cost concerns. After 35 years of taking care of others, it was time to prioritize my own health and happiness. 6 months after my retirement ceremony, Marcus called with news that he and Jennifer were expecting their first child. His voice carried excitement mixed with anxiety about the financial responsibilities of parenthood, and he mentioned that Jennifer's medical care at a prestigious hospital in Miami Beach was expensive, even with his company's health insurance coverage. The conversation revealed that their lifestyle was stretching their budget, despite Jennifer's family assistance with housing costs. The pregnancy announcement created an opportunity for me to observe how Marcus and Jennifer would handle the challenges of expanding their family while maintaining the expensive lifestyle they had adopted. Jennifer had specific expectations about prenatal care, birthing classes, and baby preparations that required significant financial investment, including decorating a nursery with designer furniture and enrolling in exclusive parenting programs offered in Coral Gables. During this period, I maintained my distance from their daily lives as requested, but I stayed informed about their situation through mutual family friends and occasional brief phone conversations with Marcus. It became apparent that the financial pressure of maintaining Jennifer's lifestyle expectations while preparing for a baby was creating stress in their marriage and affecting Marcus's job performance at the accounting firm. Jennifer's parents had made it clear that their support would continue only as long as Marcus demonstrated commitment to their family values and maintained the social connections that could benefit their law firm's business relationships. This created additional pressure for Marcus to conform to expectations that often conflicted with his natural personality and the values he had learned during his upbringing in a working-class family. 8 months into Jennifer's pregnancy, I received an unexpected phone call from Marcus. His voice sounded strained and uncertain, lacking the confidence he had displayed during the early months of his marriage. He asked if we could meet for coffee to discuss some important family matters that were weighing on his mind, suggesting that something significant had changed in his perspective about his new life. We met at a Cuban cafe in Little Havana, a neighborhood that held special meaning for both of us because it was where I had worked many cases and where Marcus had spent time with me during school holidays when he was younger. The familiar environment seemed to relax him slightly, and for the first time in months, he appeared more like the son I had raised rather than the social climber he had become since his marriage. The conversation began with awkward apologies about his behavior during the retirement ceremony and the months that followed. Marcus admitted that he had been overwhelmed by the pressure to fit into Jennifer's social circle and had made decisions that compromised his authentic self in an attempt to meet expectations that felt increasingly unnatural and unsustainable. He described feeling lost in his new life and disconnected from the values that had guided him during his youth. He told me about financial problems that had emerged as the reality of maintaining Jennifer's lifestyle became clear. The house payments, combined with her expectations for entertainment, clothing, and social activities, had created debt that was growing faster than his income could manage. Additionally, Jennifer's demands for an expensive private hospital delivery and luxury baby items were adding financial pressure that was affecting his sleep and work concentration. Jennifer had begun making disparaging comments about his limited background whenever money became tight, reminding him that her family had invested in their marriage and expected certain results in terms of social advancement and professional networking. She frequently mentioned that her parents were disappointed in Marcus's inability to maximize the opportunities they had provided through their social connections and financial support. Marcus confessed that he had been considering taking a second job or requesting advances against his salary to meet Jennifer's financial expectations, but he was beginning to realize that this approach would only create a cycle of debt and stress that could destroy both his health and his career prospects. He was starting to understand that trying to maintain an artificial lifestyle was unsustainable and was damaging his sense of self-worth and personal integrity. As I listened to my son describe his struggles, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness at seeing him suffer, satisfaction that he was finally recognizing the value of authentic relationships, and an unexpected opportunity to rebuild the father-son bond that had been damaged by his attempts to impress Jennifer's family. However, I also recognized that this was an important lesson Marcus needed to learn about staying true to personal values regardless of external pressures. I offered my emotional support unconditionally but made it clear that any practical assistance would depend on genuine changes in his attitude toward our relationship and toward the values that had been important in our family during all the years of my law enforcement career. I didn't mention Ray's inheritance yet, wanting to ensure that his apparent change of heart was authentic and not motivated by desperate financial need or temporary marital difficulties. Over the following weeks, Marcus began visiting me regularly, initially to discuss his marital problems, but gradually rediscovering the comfort and unconditional support that had characterized our relationship before his marriage. We talked about mistakes, forgiveness, and the importance of maintaining authenticity in all relationships, including marriage, even when facing pressure from family members or social expectations. Jennifer disapproved of these visits and began creating arguments whenever Marcus mentioned spending time with me. The tension in their marriage intensified when Marcus started questioning some of Jennifer's excessive spending on items she considered necessary for maintaining their social status among her friends in Coral Gables and Miami Beach. He was beginning to understand that her definition of necessary expenses was based on appearance and social climbing rather than genuine need or financial responsibility. The crisis came when Jennifer gave Marcus an ultimatum: choose between maintaining a close relationship with me or preserving their marriage. She argued that my negative influence was making Marcus question the financial and social decisions they had made together, and that it was necessary to completely eliminate any emotional dependence on his father for their marriage to prosper and for him to fully integrate into her family's social and business circles. Marcus called me that night, crying over the phone as he described Jennifer's ultimatum and his confusion about what decision to make. It was evident that he had matured considerably during the months of pressure and stress, and that he was finally beginning to evaluate his life based on his own values rather than the external expectations he had been trying to fulfill since his marriage to Jennifer. It was at that moment that I decided to reveal the truth about Ray's inheritance. I explained the entire situation. My late partner's investment portfolio, the years it had remained unknown to me, the legal process that had resulted in the transfer of $4.8 million to my control. Marcus was in complete shock, unable to initially process the magnitude of what I was telling him about our family's actual financial situation. The revelation completely changed his perspective on the economic dynamics that had been controlling his life for the past year. He realized that I had possessed the resources to compete with Jennifer's family financially but had chosen not to do so, allowing him to learn important lessons about character, values, and authenticity in relationships without the distraction of sudden wealth or the ability to simply buy his way into social acceptance. He also understood that his behavior during the retirement ceremony and the months afterward had been especially painful, considering that I had been dealing with this new financial reality while being treated as a social embarrassment by his wife and her family. The irony of the situation was evident. He had been rejecting the only person in his life who actually had the financial capacity to support him without conditions, manipulation, or expectations about social status. Marcus made a brave but necessary decision. He confronted Jennifer about the ultimatum and explained that he was not willing to cut his relationship with his father as a condition for continuing their marriage. He also communicated his intention to reevaluate their lifestyle and reduce unnecessary expenses to live within their actual means, regardless of her family's social expectations or the pressure to maintain appearances among her friends. Jennifer's reaction was predictable but devastating. She escalated the conflict by involving her parents, who threatened to withdraw their financial support if Marcus didn't control his new attitude and return to the behavior he had shown during the first months of their marriage. The economic manipulation that had been subtle during their courtship became explicit and aggressive, revealing the true nature of her family's support. The marriage ended officially 6 months later when Jennifer decided that she couldn't deal with a husband who didn't share her social and economic priorities. The divorce process was relatively simple considering they had been married less than 2 years and had no children yet. Though Marcus lost the down payment money he had contributed to their house purchase and faced some financial consequences from breaking their lease on an expensive apartment. During this difficult period, I provided the emotional support Marcus needed to process the end of his marriage and reevaluate his life priorities. We used part of Ray's inheritance to ensure he had adequate legal representation during the divorce proceedings, and also to help him establish himself in a modest but comfortable apartment in a part of Miami that better reflected his authentic values and financial reality. The experience had been painful but educational for both of us. Marcus learned valuable lessons about authenticity, the importance of maintaining solid family relationships, and the dangers of trying to live a life that doesn't reflect genuine personal values. I learned about the importance of forgiveness, patience, and allowing important people in our lives to make mistakes and learn from them without abandoning them during their most vulnerable moments. 6 months after the divorce, Marcus and I had rebuilt our relationship on a stronger and more mature foundation. He had developed a new appreciation for the sacrifices I had made during his childhood and adolescence, and I had found a balance between being a supportive father and maintaining healthy boundaries that protected my own emotional well-being and financial security. We decided together how to use Ray's inheritance responsibly and meaningfully. We established a scholarship fund to help children of police officers and first responders obtain higher education, honoring Ray's memory and the values that had been important in our law enforcement family. We also invested in rental properties that would provide stable long-term income while contributing to affordable housing options in working-class Miami neighborhoods. Marcus returned to work with a new perspective on success and happiness, focusing on building a solid career based on his own merits and values rather than trying to impress others or maintain expensive appearances. His relationship with money became healthier and more realistic, understanding that financial security was important but shouldn't control the most important life decisions about relationships and personal integrity. 2 years after the retirement ceremony that had marked the lowest point in our relationship, Marcus met Sophia, an elementary school teacher who shared his values about family, authenticity, and the importance of genuine relationships over social appearances. Their courtship developed naturally and without pressure, based on real compatibility rather than superficial impressions or economic considerations that had characterized his relationship with Jennifer. When Marcus introduced me to Sophia, it was immediately evident that this relationship was fundamentally different from what he had experienced with Jennifer. Sophia treated me with genuine respect and warmth, showing real interest in getting to know me as a person and understanding the history that Marcus and I had shared during all the years before she came into our lives. She appreciated the sacrifices and values that had shaped our family. Marcus's second wedding, celebrated 2 years after the disaster with Jennifer, was an intimate and authentic celebration in the backyard of our family home, with a local mariachi band, homemade food prepared by family and friends, and an atmosphere of genuine joy that contrasted dramatically with the cold ostentation of the first ceremony. Sophia insisted that I have the place of honor as father of the groom and participated actively in planning every detail. During his speech at the reception, Marcus spoke publicly about the lessons he had learned about true love, the importance of family, and the value of maintaining relationships based on mutual respect and unconditional support. He specifically mentioned the sacrifice and wisdom of his father, who had demonstrated that true love sometimes requires patience and forgiveness even when it hurts deeply. Our family's story had become one of redemption and growth, demonstrating that even the deepest wounds can heal when genuine love exists and there's willingness to learn from mistakes. Ray would have been proud to see how his financial legacy had not only provided security but had also taught important lessons about character, values, and the difference between authentic success and superficial status seeking. Today, 4 years after that painful retirement ceremony where I was treated as a social embarrassment by my daughter-in-law, I have a beautiful relationship with Marcus and Sophia, and I'm a grandfather to 2 precious grandchildren who fill my life with joy and purpose. Ray's inheritance gave us financial security, but the lessons learned during the difficult years gave us something much more valuable: a deep understanding of unconditional love and the importance of staying true to our most important values regardless of external pressures. The material wealth had come into our lives, but the emotional and family wealth we had rebuilt after almost losing it was the real treasure we had gained from this entire experience. We had learned that true love transcends economic and social differences, and that the most valuable relationships are those that survive the most difficult tests and emerge stronger on the other side.